is important that you are smart as hell if you are going to be resilient. You cannot afford to stay ignorant. Hey dreamers, welcome back to the Dreaming Forward podcast. I'm really excited about the next few weeks because we're talking about one of my favorite topics that reflects my personal values, which is resilience. We're going to talk about it from three different angles. The first being personal resilience. So, how can you be resilient for yourself as an individual? Team resilience, and then we're going to talk about organizational resilience. For the conversation around team resilience, that's going to bleed into the out of scope episode. And I think y'all are going to like that one a lot. So looking forward to that. Let's jump right into it. Resilience is, again, one of my core values as an individual. I have had to live out resilience in my personal life, definitely in my professional life. And I'll be honest with you, it is not easy. So I won't make up some fairy tale and say, oh, to be resilient, just do it and you'll be fine. No, it is very painful, but it is necessary. Let's start by talking about the definition of resilience. Y'all know I love words. So I looked up the definition in preparation for this episode, and so I got some notes. Resilience is defined as the ability to withstand difficulty, the ability to bounce back. So if you think about the power of resilience and how you can cultivate resilience, the number one thing to think about is the fact that resilience requires difficulty. It requires failure. It requires setbacks. It requires conflict. And that's one of the most painful parts, especially depending on where it comes from. Y'all also know that I love a good acronym. So I developed an acronym of how you can cultivate and develop personal resilience. And that acronym is A.L.A.R.M. I don't know why I came up with A.L.A.R.M. That's just what came to me first. So A.L.A.R.M stands for awareness, likability, acuity, research, and mastery. Let's start with talking about awareness. One of the key features of resilience is being aware of yourself, your story, and that's at the micro level. So I think sometimes we try to be hyper aware of all of the things that are happening around us, world events. And don't get me wrong, that's important too. I'm going to get to that in a second. But having an awareness of yourself is going to be critical for understanding even what's happening outside of you. Being aware of your story, all of the experiences that shaped you, your family history, your ability to thrive, and your threshold to thrive. So what do I mean by all of that? I'll use myself as an example because it's easier to just spill my own tea than be trying to spill y'all's. I recognize that I have a penchant for pushing through things without taking a break. A lot of that has to do with my own childhood trauma, my own background, and going to really rigorous schools as a child. It's nothing for me to pretend like nothing is wrong and just keep pushing, 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 pushing. That's not healthy. So because I'm aware of that, I have to be careful not to overdo it and lead myself into burnout. A part of my resilience as an adult, ironically, has not been to learn how to push through more difficulty. For me, pushing through means learning to take rest. I get upset when I have to go to sleep. I get upset when I feel like I need to take a nap. I get upset when I feel like I need to slow down because I'm so used to pushing, pushing, pushing. But I've learned to be aware of my own thresholds and pain tolerance to say, hey, it's actually time to take a break. It's actually time to take a step back, because if not, this next 30-day run we got to go on, or this next 12-hour push that you have to finish this project, is not going to be able to happen. So again, that self-awareness is important. You also want to be aware of your own goals and what really drives you. This is something that I recently had to remind myself of with another business venture that I had. And someone came to me and wanted a particular service and product. I was really excited about it. And it didn't quite go the way I thought that it would. My first reaction, the emotional reaction, was to be upset, to be hurt. And that's valid. So emotions are valid. There's a reason why you feel what you feel. But I quickly realized to keep going down that path and try to please this particular target market, I would be betraying my own values and my own interests and things that I'm passionate about. So I decided to just close up that entire service. I, for the first time, probably did not necessarily feel like I'd failed myself or that I was doing a bad thing. Because typically, if I have to stop something, I take it personally. That's just a me thing. But this time, it was just clear. I'm not going to do that. That's not reflective of how I want to show up in the market. It's not sustainable for me. I need to move on to something else. I also want you to think about how your goals will drive processes. For example, if you were to say that you want to be a doctor or in the medical field, pretty much every medical role that I can think of requires extensive training, some form of an apprenticeship or residency or practicum. If you aren't aware of your goals and what interests you and what matters to you, you won't learn what you need to learn. And learning is a key part of resilience. How you're going to be able to get through difficulty is through knowledge, wisdom, and discernment. If you don't know what you need to know, you can't develop wisdom. And if you can't develop wisdom, it's almost impossible to cultivate discernment. I want a huge part of your resilience journey to focus on learning and building the stamina to learn. I think that is becoming a lost art because we like bite-sized things. Ironically, I'm telling you this on a podcast, which is made to be kind of bite-sized on social media. But cultivating the stamina to learn is going to be your best friend on your resilience journey. I also want to challenge you to have an awareness of your triggers. There are going to be a million articles, social media posts, little short videos, all kinds of stuff that's going to talk about childhood triggers. And to be clear, I am not a clinician. I'm not a therapist. I am an executive coach and organizational psychologist. I am not a medical professional in any way. But what I will say is that recognizing your triggers for both perceived positive and negative emotions is going to be so important in understanding what type of resilience you need to build, how you need to cultivate resilience over time. One of my triggers is being needed to fix something. So, because again, I grew up in the environment that I grew up in, early parentification, early outsized responsibility, I am drawn to feeling like someone or something is a project. And the harder I have to work and the harder I have to perform to be perceived as valuable and useful, it's like bees to honey. I need that. I've had to learn that that is not always necessary. And in fact, it can be a distraction on my journey. I want you all to recognize, again, those triggers. Another one of my triggers is around money. So I love spending money. I like the actual act of spending money. That is not always a good thing because fiscal responsibility is a huge part of being not only a business owner, but honestly, just a responsible adult. And I've had to learn to really watch myself, especially in happier times. So if I'm feeling bad, I've taught myself not to overspend or to do shopping therapy. But when I'm happy, oh my goodness, I gotta go buy something. I need a new dress. I need a new outfit. I gotta go out to dinner. No, we're not doing any of that. I've learned, okay, you're happy, pick one thing to buy, and here's the monetary threshold. Pick one thing to go do, and here's the threshold for that. So again, the triggers are not just only for negative emotions or perceived negative emotions, but it's also for when you're feeling good and when something positive happens. Resilience is not just for those internal things, it's for that external stuff. And so now we're going to transition to talking about the external part. Because when you think about likability and resilience is almost completely determined by external forces. Yes, we develop internal values, internal traits, but it's often in response to forces in our external environment. I want you to think about what likability means for your geographic region, for your industry, for your titling and leveling, for your ideal role or position. If you know that overwhelmingly in your industry, there is an expectation for you to be a lot more stoic in your body language and you are extremely expressive, it's not that you need to change yourself, but you have to be aware of how that could undermine your growth path. You would have to work differently than others. I won't necessarily say harder, but you have to work differently than others to cultivate the relationships that you'll need to navigate challenges. That's a part of resilience. I have worked in industries where there was just this outsized focus on results, 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 and finishing projects, regardless of whether or not the projects added any value, whether or not they were executed well, whether or not they were developed well. I struggled in a lot of jobs because for me, I am willing to take more time to develop the information that I need, the frameworks, and then execute. That difference in timeline orientation did not bode well for most of the work environments I've been in. It took me a long time to learn that. But once I got it, I was able to put myself in a position professionally where I could be myself, and that is as a consultant. The last piece I'll say about that, I mentioned geographic region. Different regions operate differently. I've had the privilege of living all over this country and traveling and working all over the world. Every place is not the same. So there are some cities that I've been to where the way I have been socialized and the way I was raised is just not quite a fit. And then there are other places where it's actually a really good fit. You'll find your place. It's not always that you need to just stay put in one spot, because I actually think I've benefited greatly from living a bunch of different places. I recognize why some cities didn't quite work out the way I thought they would. I'm going to say it like that. Acuity. The level of wisdom and intelligence and shrewdness that you need to be resilient cannot be overstated. It is important that you are smart as hell if you are going to be resilient. You cannot afford to stay ignorant. Notice I didn't say be ignorant, I said stay, because we're all ignorant of something. But you have to have an obsession with growth and development and learning and knowledge if you are going to be resilient, because ignorance and the complacency with ignorance will do you in every time. I've been able to navigate the difficulties that my company has experienced over the last 18 months because I was committed to constantly learning and growing. I recognized almost right away that I knew very little about business, finance, about formal marketing and sales, because that's not my focus area. And I committed to learning, reading books, reading articles, watching videos, attending development programs, watching webinars, having informational interviews, getting mentors, hiring people that are way smarter than me in those areas. All of that matters. And if you assume that you know everything or are too comfortable not knowing something and just saying that that's that, you are going to put the final nail in your own coffin, personally and professionally. When you realize you don't know something, fix it. Go learn something. You may never become an expert. I may never be an expert in marketing. I may never be an expert in sales. I may never be an expert in finance. In fact, I know I'm not going to be an expert in finance. But I can at least know basics to be able to thrive. So again, that acuity is going to be so important because you cannot afford to be ignorant and be resilient. Next is research, and that ties into acuity because there is so much information available. We talk a lot about how we have the whole world's history of information, to be honest, at our fingertips now through the internet. But we have very little understanding about how to sort through that, how to validate that information, how to synthesize that information and convert it to action items that are going to produce quality results. If you haven't taken courses or had some type of training in quantitative and qualitative analysis, I would strongly encourage you to do so within the next 12 months, because the misinformation that is spread so rapidly on the internet, on these platforms, it is not going away. It's only going to get worse. I'm sure you've heard in the market about AI, how smart it is. But the truth is, AI is only as helpful as the queries you present to it. So if you present poorly worded or designed queries to an AI interface or an AI program, you're going to get shoddy results. I want you to learn the basics of researching. I recently had a client that I was talking to about this, and I was telling them that we take for granted that we've been conditioned to understand the principles of research. I was fortunate enough to go to a research institution for undergrad in the University of Michigan. Is one of the top research institutions in the world. And that was baked into the curriculum in pretty much any course you took. I am shocked at the way that people absorb wrong information, do not understand how to sort through data, don't understand basic principles of statistical analysis, cannot read studies, and they take it and spit it out like it's the gospel truth. It is terrifying to me as a researcher. And I don't want that to be you, because your inability to do quality research and use those insights to make good decisions are detrimental to your brand. Learning to conduct quality research, look at information, analyze it, synthesize it is going to be your best friend in cultivating resilience. Last point, mastery. You cannot be resilient if you have not mastered something. I think there was a quote from one of the Real Housewives franchises. One of the ladies said to someone else, "What do you do well?" And that's a valid question. What do you do well? What can you be trusted to do almost completely better than every other person in your industry? What could you hang your hat on that you like, you not touching me in this? What is that thing? If you haven't mastered anything, you got to take a step back and look at yourself. This is where age becomes a factor. If you're 21, that's another 10, you haven't mastered anything. You haven't been alive long enough to master it. But if you 35, 40, 50, 60, and you can't think of one thing that you have learned and practiced and are recognized for doing well, you're going to have a hard way to go. A lot of this frustration that we're seeing with people and the podcasting trends of woe is me and the whole world is against me and I hate all of this. A lot of it is because people are frustrated that they have not managed the phases of their lives well, and because they have not learned to be able to do something so well that they can ride out the storms of life. Period. Period. When you frustrated and you 40 something, and let me spill my own tea, because I'll be 39 in a couple weeks. I know for a fact if I really, really wanted to, I could go find a job doing something that I could at least make a livable wage doing. I'm able to have that confidence because I have learned several trades, skills, career paths, skill sets. I know one, are marketable, two, are in demand, and three, will be able to pay me enough to at least live and survive. When you haven't done that, it makes life way harder than it needs to be. And I want to be clear, because I know somebody going to try to misunderstand this. I'm not saying that recessions don't hit you hard. I'm not saying that unemployment waves are not a thing of life. They are. But a lot of us are struggling because the skill sets we have are obsolete. Relationships that we've built have become stagnant or are not relevant to what's needed in this phase of our lives. We have no understanding of macroeconomic trends. We cannot understand where we need to position ourselves. We're having a tough time because of the choices that we've made. That's the short of it. Learn to master something. I don't care if you master digging ditches. You better do some research. You better understand what's the demand for ditch digging, period. I don't care if you are in the medical field. You need to learn all the different ways that you can master your craft. I'll give you one final example. And I think this will sum up how I've described this A.L.A.R.M method for cultivating resilience as an individual. Over 10 years ago now, so this was probably like 2012, I recognized that I wanted to stay in the HR field. I was an accidental HR professional, but I liked it. And I knew at that time I was doing HR and social services. That didn't pay enough, and I wanted to transition into the public sector because I was in grad school. And so I started doing research on HR as a field. At that time, SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, had this model talking about all the functional areas of HR. I looked at it and it was talent acquisition and compensation and L&D, learning and development. And I looked at all the functional areas, and in that model, it listed what are like the key projects and tasks that those areas were responsible for. I sat down and wrote which ones I did well, which ones I had no experience in, which ones that I think I could do most easily, which ones would take a long time, what are the certifications related to each one, what were the job prospects. This took like a week to do this analysis. But that was the beginning of me setting the rest of really my 9 to 5 career path. And it took almost those next 10 years, so up until about a year ago, for me to feel like I had mastered most of those functional areas enough to be able to feel comfortable working and performing at a high level. That's intentionality. You cannot afford to not do research and understand the landscape of what you want to accomplish. You can't afford not to build relationships that are going to help you thrive through it. That's that likability. You can't afford to be ignorant and lack acuity in what it is that you're doing. And you certainly can't afford to be unaware. That's the A.L.A.R.M method. That is how you can cultivate individual resilience. I cannot stress enough, you have to do it. This is not optional. The world is not always going to be fair. It's not always going to be fun. You not always going to succeed. You're going to fail at something. You going to fall on your behind. Maybe it's going to be a hard fall. Maybe it might be a soft landing. But you going to fail and fall. Resilience is necessary. And the quicker you accept that and ride with that, the better off you're going to be. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what does resilience mean to you, and which of the principles of the A.L.A.R.M method do you think you do the best, and which do you think perhaps you need more work in? All right, see you next time, Journey.